Brian Beyer, co-founder and CEO of Red Canary here to talk about building an atomic testing program. Brian leads Red Canary to bring world-class monitoring, detection, and response to every business. Prior to co-founding Red Canary, Brian incubated cybersecurity products at Kairos, innovated big data processing solutions for the intelligence community at Northrop Grumman, and started his career in cybersecurity at Mantic's Computer Forensics and Intrusion Analysis Group. Please welcome Brian Beyer.
All right, I have the dubious honor of standing in between you and drinks. But here's the good news. If you've heard about Atomic Red Team today and are wondering what that is, this is your crash course before we get down to drinks and maybe talk about it more. All right, so to dive in, we're going to talk about what it means to build an atomic testing program. So what is this atomic testing that we speak of? To start with, think atoms, the basic unit of any chemical element, not blowing up your security program. Not that type of atomic. Oh, our battery is running low. Noted, I'll move faster. Oh, can you click the mouse if you get a second, please? All right, so atomic test has two traits. The first trait is that they're small. Think that that test is mapped to a single atomic technique or a single attack technique and not more than that. The second trait it has is that they're very easy to execute. We want this to be something that anyone can very quickly pull up, execute on their systems, and see the results. This is what an atomic test looks like. We have a name, we have a description, we have an annotation that says what platforms they run on, as well as the actual commands that you would copy and paste into your command prompt. So the point of this, again, is we want it to be simple to very quickly go from an attack technique to the actual code you would run in order to exercise that test without needing complicated frameworks, coordination with your red team. We want to make it simple. So why would we do this? There's a couple key beliefs that we had. The first of them is that we believe that testing your coverage is one of the most important things you can do to continually move your security program forward. Right now, in a lot of security programs, it's something that's done only when an external third party comes in and does your quarterly or annual pen test. Now in this room, we've got a lot of really smart teams. We've got a lot of great red teams in here. For some organizations, it's a test that's done only when the red team shows up and runs a new campaign. What we believe is that the best way for security programs to evolve is to be able to run tests like this, not just quarterly or monthly or weekly, but even be able to do it continuously. Now, one of the best ways you can do that is this testing has to be fast and easy. And if you do all of that, there's this greater part of knowledge, which I think we can all thank attack for, is that defenders have to keep understanding how adversaries are operating. As wild as it may sound, it's just as important for blue teams today to understand how Conflicker works from 2008 as the Equation group from several years ago. Both of those techniques are very much mapped to attack and very much still used in the wild today. So this is something I found this weekend that I thought was an awesome suggestion. Comes from Tim Melkenvetter out at Walmart, as well as Tim McGee, of this suggestion of how do you actually start testing against attack. And their original idea was, well, why don't we just roll the dice or roll a big wheel, end up with 2 to 3 techniques, and have that start to become the adversary you're emulating. And so for the last couple minutes we have here, we're going to walk through that. Here's our giant attack matrix. We're going to pick one, get your bingo cards ready. It's not process doppelganging. Instead, squibbly-doo. This is what we at Red Canary call a Casey special. It's the nightmare thing that shows up on Twitter that you have to figure out what it actually does. All right, so probably very useful. And so what do we do now? If you're like me, the first time that shows up, you have no idea how to actually run this test yourself. When it first showed up, I didn't know what commands that I would go run, or if I was on a blue team, to simulate that behavior. And that's the point of Atomic Red Team. So to be clear, Atomic Red Team is nothing that we sell. It's an open source community. Many of you have contributed tests to it and been a part of that community. You all are awesome. And what Atomic Red Team does is it's a GitHub repository that has in it a definition and a set of tests that lets you actually run these exact things yourself. So you can jump to the GitHub repository, say I'm looking for T1117. You can see the information sucked in from the brand new attack website, which I think went live today. This runs from the same sticks behind it. And then you can see what tests are out there. So you can see in this case with Squibbly-Doo, we have 3 different tests. We have regserve32 running from local com, remote com, local DLL, and then all of the steps you would take to run it yourself. And so some ideas of how you can use this. Things we've seen teams use that really help this become ingrained in their culture. 1, make yourself a recurring calendar invite. Set something up for every week that just says, go roll the dice, pick a new technique, and run that test, and then see if your blue team calls you. Second, the whole point of a lot of this is understanding what your gaps are. Like some of the presentations talked about earlier, it's less about pass or fail, it's more about knowing what you do and don't have visibility into. And then one of the big drivers behind all of this is use this information to both hold your team and yourselves accountable, but also your vendors. So finally, to end on a little bit of fun, they had such a good idea of rolling the dice that we actually shipped that onto the Atomic Red Team website this weekend. So if you want to roll the dice, go on there, click the button, it randomly selects a tactic, technique, and test, copy, paste, and run it on your system, and pop some calc. So final thing I want to end on, would love to know, show of hands, how many of you have run atomic tests from Atomic Red Team? Awesome. How many of you have contributed to it? All right, we got maybe just Dave here as the winner. Perfect. So the one thing I want to end on is Atomic Red Team and MITRE and everything you guys have done only works because of the community here. Want to say a huge thank you from myself, from Casey, from Mike, everybody who's worked on this. You guys' support, what you've done with Attack, what you've done to support all of this. This only works because of the community. It's awesome to see it all come together. So the thing I'd love you to do, come contribute additional tests to Atomic Red Team, tell other blue teams and red teams so they can use it as well, and let's keep moving security forward. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We have plenty of time for questions. So, do you have any questions yet? For the win.
Scott,
You're going to ask the same question, aren't you?
Scott, the answer is Atomic Red Team is 1 year old. That's how long it's taken.
Yeah, how long did that, yeah, so the question, Brian, is, great talk. The question is, tell us a little bit how complete you'd say Atomic Red Team is, like what kind of percentage coverage do you have and how do you feel about that, right? And how do you feel, what confidence level do you have that kind of, gets better or maintains over time?
I think from the last numbers I've seen, it's somewhere around 40 to 50% of the attack techniques have a test behind them. Some of them, if I think about the theoretical max, is probably going to be in the 70 to 80% range because a lot of the attack techniques start to get a little more esoteric, and I don't know how you'd write an atomic test for supply chain introduction. Maybe email Bloomberg. Maybe that's how you test it. Not really sure. There will be a limit of what we can get to. Confidence level, I'd say overall, is very much we need continued support from the community to flesh them out more. Right? There's a lot of techniques who only have 1 or 2 tests behind them, and there are a lot of variations of techniques and procedures that the attack team has been working on that would really help fill in a lot of those gaps.
We had another question.
He said it.
Any other questions? So I had one while people are thinking. For your coverage, do you have a navigator layer that shows what tests are covered or not?
We don't yet. We're going to.
All right.
Sounds like a good hackathon project.
Every time someone uses the navigator, an angel gets their wings.
All right.
Any other questions? Yep, right there.
So just on the
coverage that you were talking about. I noticed in general, a lot of these attacker tools, they really focus on the, say, installation or the middle part of the chain where the attacker is on the box, is using accessing tools, but finding tools that they can emulate things like privilege escalation or a full browser exploit or sandbox evasion that are things that are a little bit more like high bar, but we saw in the attacker, that's almost really rare. Right? So does this mean that basically it's a lack of the tools, or I mean the red team tools, or these type of attacks are much more hard to find, so the cost is higher? This means that basically they're more expensive.
I think there's probably a couple different things that feed into why certain squares may be filled in more than others. One of them is going to be based on prevalence of what we see in the wild. So some of the history of Atomic Red Team was that we wanted to help potential teams evaluating products like Red Canary or other EDR vendors. We wanted to help them better evaluate like an adversary actually works, not just download 10 samples from VirusTotal and see what happens. And so the initial set of tests very much skews toward what we see in the wild. The other part of it is, as we continue to grow and build it, we'll definitely favor easier techniques to test and implement. And a lot of the execution-based tests are a lot simpler to simulate than something that may require a full payload to be built, compiled, tested cross-platform that might do things like sandbox evasion. So it's one of those things where I expect that the first squares that get filled in are the simpler ones, and the ones that get filled in later tend to be harder. So if you have expertise in that, looking forward to seeing your pull request.
Yes. Pushing 0 days toward it.
Yes, please, more 0 days.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Brian? Here we go. Just
Hey, are you aware that some people are actually detecting the usage of a framework? So like detecting pulls from your GitHub repository and things like that. Like what can be done for everyone to raise the scrutiny on whether or not people are actually properly detecting attack techniques versus detecting atomic frameworks?
So you're asking how would we make it easier or
Yeah, I
harder
guess
to
aside
detect?
from people just cloning the repo or hosting the scripts somewhere else, which then, aren't going to flag on the same detection.
That's the best way to do it. I mean, one of the things we've tried to be careful of is making it clear that what sits up in that repository is something that you should be able to know, hey, that's where I'm actually getting my tests from. And so we do a lot to make sure that you can't try and hide that and make it simple that if you do want to detect things coming from Atomic Red Team, you can. Right? In my opinion, that's something a blue team should be able to cheat if they want to and say, I'm going to pick up everything that comes in from Atomic Red Team. But if you want to use it in a case where someone might be cheating against you, absolutely. Clone the repo yourself, keep it local, use interesting execution frameworks in order to muddle around with some of the command line parameters. All of those are great ways to skip past the cheaters.
Yep, cool.
any other questions for Brian? If not, please join
Cool.
me in thanking him.
Thank you.